Good morning, students. So for our assignment for Tuesday for math, we have adding mixed numerals with like denominators. So if you are comfortable with adding fractions as we did yesterday and Friday, then this will be very easy. So don't get intimidated by the larger numbers because we're just following steps 1 through 4, and I'll be doing some sample questions with you. So what you're going to do after you complete your review exercises and speed drills, remember you do have to add a fraction up here, so this is a good warm-up. You're going to follow these 4 steps. So you're going to add the fractions first. So as you can see here, a mixed numeral is a whole number with a fraction. So at first, you're not going to pay attention to the whole number. You're going to focus on the fraction only, and you're going to add them just like you would add any fraction with a like denominator, like you did yesterday. Then, after you add the fractions, you will then add the whole numbers. And then we'll follow the same steps that we always follow after adding fractions, which is checking if there's an improper fraction as a solution, and then reducing if necessary. So, after you have corrected any improper fractions, you have to add the mixed numeral to the whole number. So I'm going to do these steps with you with the first 2 samples and perhaps another one if I see fit. So for sample 1, we have 3 1/4 plus 2 1/4. And because the denominators are the same, this is going to be much easier. So it's important that you really practice these before we move on to unlike denominators. If you have any questions or are still unsure how to add fractions, please let me know over our Zoom meeting because I wouldn't want you to go forward without you being extra comfortable with this. So we have our fraction first. Remember, step 1 is to add our fractions first. So we're going to add 1 plus 1 is 2, and the denominator stays the same, 4. Then we go to our second step, add the whole numbers next. So we're going to add these large whole numbers. So we have 3 plus 2 is 5. Step 3. If there's an improper fraction, change it to a mixed numeral. So we have 2/4 here. That is not improper, so we don't have to change it. And that means we also don't need to add it to anything. But can we reduce? We can reduce 2/4 because 2 fits into 2 once and 2 fits into 4 twice. So we can reduce 5 2/4 to 5 1/2. Let's do sample 2. We have 3 4/5 plus 2 2/5. And just a little helpful hint, try not to use your book to solve the fractions. Use an extra piece of paper even if you write small, because as you can see, some of the problems are going to have more steps than others, and it's going to be really tight if you're trying to fit it all on your work paper. So again, step 1, we add our fractions. Our numerators, 4 plus 2, 6, over our denominator, 5. Step 2, add the whole numbers. 3 plus 2 is 5. Step 3, decide if there's an improper fraction. 6/5 is improper. So following the same steps that we learned and practiced last week, you're going to divide 5 into 6. 1. 6 minus 5 is 1. And then we have 1 1/5. So this is where it can get a little bit tricky. we changed 6 over 5 to 1 1/5. So don't forget about the whole number that was there originally. You have to add this to the whole number. That is our fourth step. So we would just add 5 plus 1, which is 6, and 1/5. So just again, remember, if you have an improper fraction for your first solution and you have to change it to a mixed number, like we did here, don't forget to add this mixed number to your whole number. And then reduce if necessary, but we cannot reduce 1 over 5, so our answer is 6 1/5. You're going to follow these same steps for numbers 1 through 10. Take it one by one. Don't get intimidated by the larger numbers that are going to come because the denominators will stay the same. Just go back and follow each step one by one for each of the problems. And of course, you can log on to Zoom at 11 for further help. And here for our language arts assignment for Tuesday, we have ask, state, command, and exclaim. So we are continuing to learn about different kinds of sentences and sentence parts. So today we're learning about the purposes of sentences, and sentences have 4 purposes. They tell or make statements, they ask questions, give commands or requests, and show sudden or strong feeling. So we're going to go over the meanings of each of these and some examples. So if you go down here to the meanings, we have 4 kinds of sentences, and these are very important to remember. So definitely flag your page or turn it because you'll have to be coming back to reference this page over the next week. So we have a declarative sentence. A declarative sentence makes a statement. It ends with a period. For example, I live on 9th Avenue. An imperative sentence gives a command or makes a request. It ends with a period or an exclamation point. So before we move on to the last 2, you will notice that sometimes it can be a little bit confusing to determine whether a sentence is declarative or imperative. So the key thing to keep in mind is that an imperative sentence gives a command or makes a request. This will help you decide whether or not a sentence is declarative or imperative. They give 2 examples. Pass the butter, please. It ends with a period. However, it is not declarative because it is not just making a statement, it is asking for something, making a request. Stop this noise ends with an exclamation point because it is giving a command. For interrogative, an interrogative sentence asks a question. It ends with a question mark. Have you finished your homework? These are usually pretty easy to identify. Exclamatory sentences. An exclamatory sentence shows sudden or strong feeling. It ends with an exclamation point. What a beautiful sunrise! How thoughtful you are! So the difference between an imperative and an exclamatory sentence that ends in an exclamation point is that exclamatory sentences do not give commands. They're just showing sudden or strong feelings. So down here, you're going to identify what a few sentences are, whether they're declarative, imperative, interrogative, or exclamatory. So before you move on to think A, remember you don't have to use an extra piece of paper. You can just identify them next to these 3. And then on the next page, you will continue to complete 6 more of these. So for look closely, it says to be sure to spell declarative, imperative, interrogative, and exclamatory correctly. Notice the A before the T in each word. So make sure that you're spelling these correctly, especially that you have a guide here and a key. So just write neatly and carefully. So after you decide whether or which sentences these are, you're going to add the correct punctuation. So not only are you going to decide what kind of sentence it is, you're going to add either a period, an exclamation point, or a question mark, depending on what kind of question it is. So you're going to continue with this on page 45, and like I said, you have 6 more of these exercises to do. So deciding what kind of sentence and adding the correct punctuation. For right B, you're going to show your understanding of the 4 purposes of sentences by writing the following sentences on notebook paper. And again, as usual, if you can write small enough, you don't have to. You can fit it under, but it's up to you. You have to use your creative mind a little bit to come up with these sentences, but as long as you have the correct punctuation and they're declarative, interrogative, exclamatory, or imperative, you'll be fine. There's no wrong answers as long as you meet these requirements. We can share over Zoom as well. For Think C, you're going to memorize the 4 kinds of sentences and what they do. So you don't have to memorize them all today, but this week you should be working on memorizing what these sentences mean. So going back to page 44, just these meanings. That means if I were to ask you, what is a declarative sentence, you would be able to tell me. So here, you're identifying them again. Would this be declarative? This first one gives you the answer. Here comes Joe. Very simple. Declarative. What is the purpose? Statement. Which means a declarative sentence makes a statement. So if it were to be interrogative, for example, then you would write question next to it. And for remember D, remember that this is just going over what we've already learned in the past weeks. This time we're just reviewing a few noun exercises, in this case singular nouns and plurals. So all you have to do is just make these singular nouns plural. And of course you can reference back if there's an irregular noun that doesn't have an obvious plural. All of these should be in our guide for last week. Here for our spelling assignment for Tuesday, we have our normal vocabulary review, this time for list 8. And by now we're very familiar with what we should do with our vocabulary words. And the very first thing I recommend is to look them up in our spelling dictionary. So of course you will rewrite the vocabulary words up here. And before you match their definitions, even if you know for sure that you know the answer, look them up in the back of the book, because as you can see, these are very similar. We have revival, inform, formal, revive. So it could be the slightest difference that would make an answer right or wrong. So definitely search them up in the back and it will make the rest of the page much easier. You're going to fit in a vocabulary word to complete the sentences so that they make sense. As usual, I recommend that you read them out loud because sometimes you can identify whether or not it sounds right. Then on the bottom, you have your multiple choice. And of course, you will definitely need the meaning. So say them, write them, repeat them out loud, and complete your vocabulary page. So remember that although normally we have a read along for Tuesday, we're moving it to Wednesday according to our lesson plan. So as you can see here, we had chapter 11 yesterday, Monday, and chapter 12 is actually Wednesday, and then we move on to chapter 13 Thursday. So there will be a Zoom meeting for questions and answers today, but there will not be a read along until tomorrow. So use this time to complete your exercises that have been attached to the weekly email according to chapter 11 and to define your vocabulary words for chapter 11. And just a quick reminder, since our YouTube video for Monday was delayed, if you were not at our Zoom meeting yesterday at 11, we discussed which page numbers our science assignment was on because the student books are different than the teacher book. So lesson 1.8 composites is going to be on page 24. So you're going to read the full section 1.8 and then complete the comprehension check, which is on page 27. So you have 10 questions there. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a lot of true and false ones. And again, let me know if you need help with a read along. And if not, I will see you today at 11.